Welcome to the National Capital Project Management Symposium. Technology is changing the face of business. So much so that digital transformation is no longer a choice, it's an imperative. But research shows that 70% of digital transformations fail to reach their objectives. So how do you manage change at the speed of today's technology? How do you get your teams to fully buy into digital transformation? More importantly, how do you set yourself up for success with digital transformation? My name is John Hetherington and I'm a technology advisor, speaker and coach. I've been a management consultant with Deloitte and Ernst & Young and I've worked in technology for over 25 years. I've been in industry, both in the UK and North America. I've seen it all, both the good and the bad. And one thing is strikingly consistent. That one thing is this: people struggle with digital transformation because they struggle with change. Many people want change, but not everyone wants to change. That's why I'm really excited to be sharing my best practices during my talk on why digital transformation is not about technology at the National Capital Project Management Symposium. During my talk, I'll be sharing tips and strategies on how to manage digital change and get the right digital skills, how to spot and fix a project that's going off the rails, more importantly, how to create your own digital transformation roadmap. So, if you're a project manager, a business analyst, or a leader who's struggling with change in your teams, you don't want to miss my talk. I'm John Hetherington, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Ottawa.
Digital transformation is no longer a choice. It's something we have to do. But digital transformation isn't easy. Did you know that 70% of digital transformations fail to reach their objectives? So that begs some key questions. How do you manage change at the speed of today's technology? How do you get your teams to fully buy into digital transformation? In summary, how do you set yourself up for success with digital transformation? My name is John Hetherington. I've been in technology for over 25 years. I've seen both the good and the bad as both an employee and a consultant. And one thing is strikingly consistent. That one thing is this: people want change, but not everyone wants to change. And that change has become even harder as we enter a new industrial revolution where not only do we have to manage people, process, and technology, we also have to manage huge amounts of data and acquire a new set of digital skills. So if you're a leader, a project manager, or a BA looking to manage change in your teams and set yourself up for success, you're in the right place. Wow, that actually worked. There you go. Thank you. Yes, I was travelled in from Calgary, up most of the night practicing that, and yes, thank you. Huge relief. Anyway, so during today's talk, I'm going to share my tips and strategies for digital thinking, demystifying digital transformation, and tackling that human resistance to change. In other words, how you change, adapt, and lead is going to distinguish yourselves between the digital winners and the losers. Because digital change is constant, and digital transformation is not a revolution, it's an evolution. So how fast does digital and technology change? Change is exponentially fast. So this chart demonstrates how fast technology changes. it shows how quick computing power has grown over time. And you'll notice on the bottom there, the first 100 years, we got to the computing power of one insect brain, just one tiny little insect brain. But in the next 50 years, we're going to get the computing power of all the human brains on the planet. So 100 years, one insect brain, 50 years to all human brains on the planet, which is about 8.5 billion people. So that just shows how fast technology moves. And a great example is the WhatsApp application. Who here uses WhatsApp? Okay, so that's probably half the room, which is not entirely surprising because they started back in 2009 with just 50 people, which is probably a third, maybe a quarter of the room. And in 10 years, they've managed to scale to 1.5 billion people, 1.5 billion users on WhatsApp, just with 50 people, 50 employees. So that's an example of when you harness the power of technology in the right way, you can achieve amazing things. But we have to think differently. We have to think about this exponential growth and then use it to grow our businesses and our companies and ultimately our teams. So I'm going to show you this with movies, pizza, and toys. Who doesn't love movies, pizza, and toys? So we'll start with movies. So everyone knows about Blockbuster being slayed by the nifty, nimble Netflix that came along. And some of that is true, but there's actually 7 specific reasons why Blockbuster went bankrupt. The main one was that they actually were very slow to change. They didn't apply digital thinking. They were a well-oiled machine, very efficient, very well organized. In fact, when they were expanding rapidly on their stores, they could turn up with a tractor trailer for setting up a store and unpack the tractor trailer in the order the store would be set up. That's how efficient they were. The challenge is their change. They knew this new streaming service was coming along, and they actually set up a service called Total Access for streaming videos. But they were such a big, well-oiled machine that how do you stop a fast-moving train? They didn't change quick enough. And Netflix, as we know, was able to take advantage of that from digital thinking and got moving quicker. Then pizza. So Pizza Hut and Domino's. Now Pizza Hut are doing okay, but their growth has stalled. It's not exactly growing a lot. Whereas Domino's, for anyone who's had Domino's recently, they've been doing an excellent job around digital leadership. They realized this new industrial revolution and started to bring in new skills to their commodity pizza ordering system to make it very, very easy to get pizza. To the point where you actually don't need any clicks to order pizza with Domino's. You can order it through Amazon Alexa. You just voice control the pizza delivery. That's how far ahead they got these new skills digital skills into a pizza company to make sure they were set up for success. And then we move on to toys. Toys R Us and Best Buy, electric toys. So Toys R Us, as we know, went bankrupt. There are still a few stores, but unfortunately they didn't get ahead of that digital planning to set themselves up with a digital website. They actually partnered with Amazon. I don't know if many people know this, but back in 2000, they partnered with Amazon for an online exclusive rights for selling toys. What they didn't do is set up their own toy distribution website. So they were behind the curve, and as a result, they've been failing to catch up ever since. Best Buy, on the other hand, compete very well with Amazon. Even in the airport, I noticed they have a Best Buy pop-up store. You can buy Best Buy products, and they'll match any price that Amazon or anyone else has online. So how can they do that and remain competitive? They offer great service. You can have the product, the toy, delivered to the store and go and pick it up, delivered to a different store, have it delivered to your home, have someone come and help you in your own home, have someone consult in the store. So they use digital planning to think ahead, how can we offer that better customer experience? So in summary, They use digital thinking, digital leadership, and digital planning. And we'll come on to those 3 steps towards the end of my presentation, where I'll give you some very specific tips and strategies on how to execute these 3 core competencies in this new technology age. So how do you define digital transformation? It's all very well having these tools and skills, but where do you start? You start with the definition. Digital transformation is about transforming an existing process and specifically creating significantly better customer experience. And that's key. It's not about reducing cost or achieving growth, because, as I'll show in a second, that actually comes from that better customer experience or value. What we're doing here is we're shifting into this new world where it's not about competition or competing or creating boundaries. It's about creating a better customer experience to attract people into your businesses. And then for government and I work a lot with oil and gas who don't have end customers, it's about enhancing your own processes so more people use that and you become more efficient within your own company. And this is quite difficult because a lot of people have value. I think every one of you would say, I can bring value, I can help companies do better. But the value is sometimes locked away in a lot of bureaucracy and process. I'm sure we've all been here, right? With these clamshell blister packs, trying to get at that value, that product in the back there. This is me struggling to get my printer ink cartridge out. And this is a great example of where that value is there, but it's packaged up, it's hidden away. It's under layers of process policy and governance and day-to-day jobs and working, which just hides that value. And that's a real shame. And that's why I want to illustrate that today, so we can see how to move this forward. So let's see how this works in practice. We've talked about customer experience or value, and this chart shows how we adopt technology up on the vertical versus how much technology we adopt on the vertical versus how much technology we bring into the company and how well we bring it into the company along the horizontal axes there. So to do this, to show you this, I'm going to take you on a trip to the zoo, starting with squirrels. So squirrels are the shiny object. They go around looking for whatever they can see. What's the new technology? How do I get it? I need to go after that new technology. Just bring it into the company as fast as I can. And as a result, they bring it in really fast, but they don't always get the maturity or the value in embedding it into their company. So hence in that top left quadrant there, they're after the shiny objects. They're very tactical. They're not very strategic. And the problem with that is that a lot of tactics don't necessarily bring the full value. As the quote goes, tactics are the actual noise before defeat in the art of war. So now we're going to move to sloths. Sloths are the slow-moving companies. They adopt some technology, and when they do adopt it, they adopt it fairly okay within their companies. Nothing amazing, but nothing too extravagant either. I'm sure we can all relate to those type of companies. Next, you have the owls. So these are the wise companies. They survey the landscape, look for which technologies to pick, and when they pick a technology, they do it really well. They don't necessarily adopt a lot of technology, but when they do it really, really well. And then finally, the lions. They survey the landscape, pick the right technology, pick a lot of technology, and do it really, really well. They know what they're doing because they've moved up to that maturity scale, and as a result, the customer experience and value is there. They grow that experience out of that maturity adoption of technology and how well it's embedded into their companies. So let's have a little quiz. I'm going to shout out a company. I want you guys to shout out which animal or quadrant it's in. So let's start with Apple. Lions? I'd agree. Interesting point about Apple is they probably at one point were in squirrel zone because they were a PC or a desktop manufacturer of computing equipment. Then it went into iTunes, then it went to phones, then it went to MP3 players, the iWatch. They do dabble quite well, but now, I agree, totally. They're now in a lion's position. And that's the other thing, you've got to realize that some companies will move between these quadrants. Next company, BlackBerry. Sloth, yeah. I'd agree. It's unfortunate, but again, they were slow. Unfortunately, they were once lions, I'd say. They were doing what they did was really, really good. Everyone had a BlackBerry. I remember back in the UK in early 2000s, that was the device to have. If you were in a meeting with a BlackBerry, you were a lion, literally. You had that right technology. Unfortunately, yes, they moved to sloth. They're still in business, but they're now much slower. Final one, Government of Canada. Everything. I'm not hearing lions, but I'm. but yes, exactly. I mean, again, the reason I mentioned that is because it depends on the departments and teams within companies as well. A lot of the companies and clients I work with have pockets of all four quadrants. You have some teams that are lions, some teams that are squirrels, some sloths, some owls. And that's okay as long as they know how to manage that technology well. But overall, if you do it well, your profits will be higher than industry average. Lions and owls, for example, 26 and 9% above industry average profitability, whereas the squirrels and sloths, under industry average for profitability. And that just goes to show that as long as you build up that experience and value, you'll become more profitable and a more mature, a more successful company. But it's not always that easy. Technology is complex, right? We all know that. We've all been here. We all, yeah, needs to be a bigger hammer, right? We've all had that frustration where we just cannot get that technology working, be it our own devices or laptops or applications, or even when we're on the other end of a receiving end from a phone call to a service desk to get something fixed or updated, and it just doesn't work, so it gets really frustrating. My wife, Bex, my father-in-law, her father, owns a skeet shoot, clay pigeon shoot. He actually took his laptop to the shoot and shot it. He was so frustrated with the laptop, he just said, right, I'm done, shot it. And this illustrates another point where a lot of people lead with technology, and leading with technology, diving into it quickly, like those squirrels, is to miss the point. And it reminds me of a story. So back in 2005, Bex, my wife, and I were really excited. We were just about to emigrate to Canada. We were leaving the UK, and couldn't believe it would fulfilled a lifelong dream of coming to Canada. And who wouldn't love Canada, right? With the parks, mountains, hills, and great people. It's been a wonderful experience for us. So we were super excited, ready to go. It was 1 week before we were due to leave. And we just had to finish some electrical work, and then the tenants would move in, and we were leaving 1 week later. It was the Friday evening. I'd just arrived home from work, feeling pretty euphoric. I'd just had my leaving due at work, and everything was happy. And I came up to the door. As I up to the door, my wife opens the door and said, "John, the electrician's called. He can't turn up till Thursday." I'm like, oh. If the electrician's delayed, it means the electrical work won't get done, the house won't get finished, the tenants can't move in, we'll never get to Canada. I know, thank you, Captain Obvious. What are we going to do? I know, let me think about it. It's only a few switch plates. I could do this work. I'll tell you what, you go and put the kettle on, and I'll get to work and get it started right away. For any of you Brits in the audience, a cup of tea solves everything. So I got to work, got the switch plates, my tools, and was ready to go. Now, with electrical work, there's a safety element. As everyone knows, you should probably turn off the power at the breaker, but the breaker panel was all the way down in the basement. and I was all the way up here on the second floor, and it was just a few switch plates. I'm not doing any major rewiring or anything. So I got the first switch plate. I'm just lining it up, ready to go in, and starting to screw it in. Bam! Bags! Oh my gosh, what's wrong? What have you done? I think I've just electrocuted myself. Oh my God, are you okay? And why? Anyway, the point of the story is to lead with technology is to miss the point, similar to how I led with fixing the electrical without properly planning it out and following through with the safety checks to make sure the power is off. And a lot of my clients do that. They jump into technology, and that's what we've all got to step back and realize that shiny objects are very attractive. We want to do that new thing to get that new benefit, but it's not always the right thing to do. So not only do we have to fight the complexity of technology and how quickly we put it into our companies, we also have to fight a fundamental human resistance to change called status quo bias. So status quo bias was a study done about 50 years ago, actually. It's not new, but it's about our human resistance to change, which is inbred from the Stone Age. As you can see from the illustration, change in the Stone Age meant death or stupidity in this case. But we're inbred, we have this human resistance to change, and it manifests in three ways. Firstly, around uncertainty. And this affects everyone differently, bear in mind, but we do each have this to some degree. So a great example was my friend Paul, who was an architect and was doing okay in his architecture practice, and then he had an opportunity to apply for a job in a different state, a different province, with a new architecture firm, with more responsibility, more interesting work, more pay. It was a great opportunity for Paul. But then he got thinking about it. He thought, well, it's in a new province, I'm gonna have to move the family, I'm gonna have to find new schools, I'm gonna have to sell the house. He hadn't even got the job yet. And he was already thinking about the process, and unfortunately, in the end, he said, yeah, I'm not gonna go for it, which was a real shame because people it's exactly like Paul, people build up that uncertainty in their heads and don't try things because they're overthinking what could happen before even trying it. And again, everyone's different. Everyone have a different level of uncertainty. The next one is contradiction. We don't like to contradict existing norms and beliefs, which sounds sensible, but it unfortunately hinders innovation and growth. The prime example is institutional blindness. So when you join a new company or institution, it takes just 3 weeks to become institutionally blind, where you fall into those norms and processes of the existing company. And that makes a lot of sense, right? You've just joined a new company, you want to do well, you want to fit in. But unfortunately, that then trends you based on what they do already. It doesn't do anything new. Same with online reviews. We follow online reviews because we like to think, okay, if they've experienced that, I'll experience that. So then you follow that. You don't want to contradict, or you want to see the norms. And the last one is avoiding regret. We don't want to make bad choices, which again is normal. Why we'd never want to make a bad choice. The problem is, the more choice we have, the more we think about the problem, the bad choice it could be, even though it may not be true. And technology, there's so much technology. We have so much choice with technology. This compounds our decision-making ability around avoiding that regret. So these are human impacts of avoiding change, which impact our technology projects and decisions and ultimately growth in our companies. So how do you deliver digital transformation well? How do you manage this change? And how do you get to that, ultimately set yourself up for success with digital transformation? I actually have 7 steps, but with the time today, I'm going to cover 3 key ones based on the planning, the leadership, and the skills. So I'll do that next. But we'll start with digital thinking. So digital thinking is about thinking differently. Because again, remember that institutional blindness? So in technology, we can't rely on what we've currently done before, because what got us here won't get us there. If we keep doing what we do, we're always going to get what we get. We need to do something different. And technology is moving so fast that we have to start thinking differently. And this is pretty easy to do. It's just a little difficult to do in terms of habit. One great way to do it is feedback from your other teams and staff and customers if you have end customers. The other way to do it is just to read online in other industries, ideally outside of your company, in other industries, even other countries. What are they doing? How are they managing their procure-to-pay process? How are they managing their accounting receivables process? How are they processing transactions and implementing technology? Because that will then open you up to different ways of doing things. And this has become, unfortunately, this digital thinking and this bigger thinking is challenging because we have what's called this experience gap. So on the one side, management are focused on costs and profits and shareholders, and on the other side, customers or stakeholders in your own businesses and teams focus on less time, quality, and human ease of life. We just want to remove friction from the process. But that gap gets bigger if the management drivers, and the company drivers around that are bigger than the stakeholders and the customer drivers for time, quality, and accuracy. So how do you deal with that? We need to get to the heart of what digital transformation is. I remember we saying it's about customer experience. So using this quote is a great way to quantify that, is to create that future. We don't know what it is. We don't know what the future is. So let's create the future. Let's define our goals. And this is a framework, a great framework for doing that. So the experience is the heart of digital transformation in the middle there. And you can focus where to start on either service, data, product, or foundation. It doesn't really matter where you start, because if you start with one, the others will follow. A great example is service for Amazon. They provide great service, same-day shipping. Everyone knows that because then that's why people use them so much, even though the products themselves are nothing necessarily special, but you use that customer service. And data, that's where Netflix would trend which films you're using, and also Amazon as well. This is where Amazon span the two quadrants here, because they look at the data around customer profiles and start to recommend products you should use. So if you get your data analytics right, you can then start to provide a better experience. Google are also very good at this as well, the data side. Search engines are pretty easy to write. I think any one of us could probably find code online to create a search engine, but getting that data from the search engine and using it a way to create value and predictive results based on what you typically search on and starting to set trends, that's the key bit that's really difficult. And once you crack it, it's very good. The product, this would be Apple or Tesla as extreme examples, because they do products really, really well. It can be a solution, so it doesn't have to in your own companies. It can be a Power BI report or a dashboard, or even just a process which has less friction in it. You're providing a solution or a product. And then the foundation. So this is key to everything, because without the foundation, you won't be able to deliver the other ones, but you can do them in parallel. So this is your networks, your infrastructure, your ERP systems, making sure that you can provide those additional data, service, and products on top of your technology backbone. Microsoft do this very well. They don't necessarily not always first to market, but when they do it, they do it really well. So we've talked about the digital thinking. Then we need to move into how it works in practice. So this is an example. And the beauty of this example is it's the art of the possible, but also the art of something really small. For those who don't know some of the acronyms there, we're talking Internet of Things, which is sensors gathering data, storing it in the cloud, using data analytics to start manipulating that data. So you need to move data to information and then into knowledge. So data, information, and knowledge are the three key steps. And then artificial intelligence, machine learning, before you present it on a dashboard or a mobile device, using collaboration throughout in a product such as Teams. So good examples here are anything from hotels monitoring the temperature on a particular floor based on how many hotel participants, how many people are staying at the hotel, and then knowing that when was the last time we serviced the air conditioning unit, and then looking at the weather to know that, oh, we're going to use more heat with more clients, more hotel patrons. So we put that into the cloud, use data analytics, and the machine learning then says, yep, you should probably service your furnace sooner. Realtors are using this. They're using data stored in the cloud, the photos of houses, and data analytics and machine learning are starting to pick out items in those photos. So how many bathrooms, how many bedrooms, what sort of fixtures and fittings are in these photographs. Then they can channel those photographs based on a dashboard, the mobile dashboard, to specific clients. And the collaboration is key, and we'll come on to that, why that's such an important skill in a second. But technology, as we know, is not enough. Because technology here, for example, is a pretty straightforward thing. We're counting things. Has anyone seen the Count Me app? So this app, which is machine learning in effect, is counting how many objects on the back of this tractor trailer here, which seems pretty straightforward. And this is where I'm going to illustrate with a quiz. So I'm going to ask you another quick quiz for you guys. It's pretty simple. I'm going to ask you to identify fried chicken. Everyone knows what fried chicken looks like, right? And labradoodles. Does anyone know what a labradoodle is? Dogs, curly brown hair. So I'm going to show you a picture, and I need you to shout out how many labradoodles, dogs, how many dogs there are on the next slide. First one wins. Okay, you ready? I'm going to show you the slide now, and then you can shout out the number. Come on. 4. Yep, you have a winner. So again, this is the example of where machine learning can help to a point, but there needs to be that human interpretation. So if we think we're good at that one, let's take it up a notch. Let's use dogs again, but this time compared with muffins. Muffins are easy, right? So again, I'm going to show you a picture. You're going to tell me how many dogs you see. First one to shout it out. You ready? Okay, go. Yes. Yes, we have a winner, 10, the lady at the front here. There's a bit of a trick because there's 3 on the bottom row, 4 on the bottom row with that 3 in that box there. Well done. Yes, and a chihuahua. So this just illustrates that we can't just rely on technology. We need to plan it in the right way. And this is where I've created, based on my experience, I've created a digital transformation playbook. Now I appreciate this is a lot of information. I'm actually going to go into much more detail in my workshop tomorrow morning, and we'll start to break apart some of these elements and then do some exercises to make it real for you guys. What I'd highlight, though, is effectively it is a waterfall process, but we're adding agile type elements through it. So when we move through the design, define, deliver, and elevate, we look back, we refine, we create feedback. And 2 or 3 really important factors here around why it's applicable to digital transformation is the first one around feedback at the beginning there, just above design, which we've mentioned. Getting feedback from customers and people outside of your industry, ideally, to see how you can improve the process. And then under define there, the proof of concept, POCs, proof of concepts. So these are about starting small and scaling up fast, because there's so much technology out there, it's changing so fast. You need to start somewhere and just build it up and see how it goes. To not start, remember that status quo bias around the avoiding the contradiction and not wanting to disrupt the norms, you've got to start somewhere, and just taking some steps is better than taking no steps. The last 2 there around deliver and elevate. So learning is key, and we're going to come on to that, as well as collaboration in the digital skills in a second. But the bottom one there, break data silos, just above deliver there. So that's, once you start delivering well with technology, because data is so prevalent, you're starting to share information and learnings by breaking these data silos. And once you do it well, you move into the next part around breaking, under Elevate there, breaking organization silos. As a result of that, you start to get more innovation and rapid scaling. So we'll go into this more detail in the workshop, and I'm also available after the session for any questions. Happy to talk you through this. So now we need to focus on the skills. It's all very well knowing what we need to do in terms of that digital thinking. It's all very well planning for it and how, using this playbook. But now you need to make sure it's delivered well. So we start to talk about digital leadership, digital skills. How do we make sure these projects, these technology projects, go well? Technology is causing us to rethink leadership. Digital is creating a new set of skills. And each of you and your companies will be in different stages of these skills, but it's important to know what they are. So that's where I've illustrated these in my next slide. So then, in the past, we had competition, whereas now we have collaboration. Then we had waterfall. Now we have agile. Then we had tasks, whereas now we have innovation. Then we had output. Now we have creativity. Then we had decider in chief, whereas now we have questioner in chief. Then we had process. Now we have embracing change. So, as I said, each one of you and your teams and your departments and companies will be in different stages of the then and now. There are many people who are all in the now. There's a graduation between the two. What I'm illustrating here is that in this new digital transformation and fourth industrial revolution era, is we need to start moving to these now skills, particularly around collaboration. It's no longer about competition and creating barriers to entry. It's about making sure we collaborate and talk and share. So many companies now set up, I mean, this is where these sort of forums are great because you're meeting other industries, other people, and starting to share knowledge around how you do different projects across Ottawa. And for those traveling in from other cities and countries, sharing that knowledge with Ottawa folks as well. Waterfall and agile, I appreciate there's a place for both. I actually quite like waterfall methodology, and it has a very specific place, which is really good for when it's a time-driven deadline we have to meet. Waterfall actually works really well. Agile works very well as in other situations where we need to just prove something out quickly, less around regulation or financial constraints or deadlines. Agile has that edge there. So I actually think there's a bit of both in the now there. Innovation, we need to think differently about tasks. It's not just performing the task and then the one below it, the output. The innovation, the creativity means how do we do this differently? Which then leads into that questioner in chief. It's no longer about making big bets on we're going to go to this technology or this market or this environment, although that still happens. But getting to that process does need some questioning. Get feedback from your teams in terms of how you do things. There's no longer the expectation that you have to have all the answers. This doesn't mean the analysis about what technology you use. This is just about getting feedback to understand which technology could be advantageous to your companies and teams. And then the last one there, embracing change, which is why we're here. We're all here to embrace change and understand how to do things better. So at this point, I'm just going to pause to ask for questions, actually. So we'll have a few questions now on either this slide or anything else I've covered in the presentation, just before I move into some closing thoughts. So, going to make Pete run around for the next question. Who has a question?
See the fat man run, see the fat man run. Questions? Ah. You waited till I got to the front to raise your hand.
Okay, in many organizations that were looking at implementing digital change, we have on one end of the scale the younger group who have grown up with device in hand versus the people in control who have never sent an email.
Right.
And how do you come to find a way to implement change with such a diverse group to work with?
Yes, it's a great question. And you said it well, diverse. There is no one way to get that change with everyone. As Sandra mentioned this morning, everyone is different. Everyone has their different qualities and traits and strengths. And there's going to be groups who are not open to technology. There's going to be groups who are just not open to change. There's going to be groups who are just not open to you. It's, again, nothing personal. It's their own situation. And then you have groups which are very open to change and wanting new technology. What I found is those POCs, starting small, is starting to educate them based on what you think they would like. And it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of coffee chats. It's a lot of understanding where they are. And bear in mind, and Sandra mentioned this, I have a different scale whereby 20% of people are never going to like your idea. It doesn't matter what it is, 20% are just not going to like it. On the flip side, 20% are going to love your idea. And then there's about 60% in the middle who are like, nah, oh, yeah, whatever. The way you need to focus is on the people who love your idea and the middle. There's no point trying to convince the people who don't like your idea. That's just who they are. Which, interestingly, thinking about that means that 20% of this audience loves this presentation, and 20% hate this presentation. So, anyway, so yeah, and we can talk more after the session if you have more questions on that one.
Questions?
Oh, there's
here
one
we
there.
go. Ready?
I was afraid to ask the question because I'm afraid of catching. When you have the situation where it's been so long since the technology change has taken place that the technology we use today is held together with duct tape and gum paper, literally. And you've got your operational team is reduced down to such numbers that all they can do all day is just maintain that working. Meanwhile, you want to make a digital change. How do you make that happen when your team's already stretched?
Yes, it's a great question. And again, a challenge I see every day. I do a lot of work with oil and gas clients. And with the oil price, we've had to cut everything back incredibly far. I just want to illustrate that digital change is only one part, and I'm hoping, and I will go over this again, that digital transformation is not all about the technology, because that foundation, remember that digital foundation, as long as you do the jobs well, albeit without the technology that you'd like, by making that process better, you're ultimately creating wealth and value and growth within your companies. So I know it's a bit of a high-level statement, but focusing on what you can do well, because you won't necessarily have access to the resources to do other things, is going to be a constant challenge until the company either decides to invest in that technology, or ultimately, if it's not a fit for you and your teams, then again, you may have to look at a move. And I'm not saying jump for jump reasons, but sometimes you have to look at where you are and your company as well. But focus on your teams in terms of what can we do well based on what we have. So it could be just removing a friction from the process in terms of how the forms are approved. So there might be an approval step which doesn't have to happen at this particular step in the process. And that's why one of the first steps in that playbook is looking at the process and getting feedback from the teams to, hey, what can we do better? I'm doing an exercise tomorrow in the workshop called How Might We? How might we do something different? It's a design thinking approach to exactly that situation where you don't have access to new technology and money, but how could we do things differently? So it's a complex topic, and I'd love to chat with you afterwards about this in more detail. Okay. Hey.
So there's a change about, and people are losing jobs, finding new employers. And when an employer is interviewing, you sometimes have an opportunity to ask questions of the employer. You research them, you go online, you check out their quarterly reports. What's a question that you would ask of an employer to determine their success in let's say the next 5 years and going through this digital transformation and managing change and being successful so that you're locking into a company that has a future?
Yes. Great question. It's I've just completed a digital transformation survey with a lot of clients in Calgary, actually, in the oil and gas, because the perception is that they're very behind digital transformation. What I'm finding is every city I visit, there's some perception of behind, regardless of where it is. So I was back in Manchester in the UK in the summer. They felt they were behind Europe in terms of digital transformation. But to your point, the question I would ask is, how do you innovate? What's your approach to innovation? And again, you have to judge the interview, because some people will go, yeah, whatever, and it's not even a question you can ask. And when you say innovation, it's how does the company look for new ideas? How do they do different things? Is there opportunity for me to bring forward new ideas? And then ideally, notice I didn't say technology. How do you bring forward new ideas for technology to solve? That's the second part. So it's asking them about their approach to new ideas and ultimately new technology. That would be one question for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Could you elaborate on the questionnaire in chief part? I get it, decided in chief then. When it comes to questionnaire in chief now, a little bit of elaboration and perhaps provide an example.
So an example, did you say?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of I can't name them, but I have a couple of client examples whereby, and again, this isn't necessarily the CEO or the leadership, although that does count. I've seen this both at a manager level and at the team level for project managers, where there was a lot of thought previously around you had to come up with the answer and have all the answers for everything and everyone, whereas now, particularly as a project manager, the first thing I'm going to do is ask my team. The key thing is you have to time box it. You can't spend a lot of time going through those questions, because you will end up going through analysis paralysis, because everyone's going to have a great idea. And that same 20, 60, 20%, there's going to be great ideas and there's going to be ideas which you shouldn't really do. But getting the feedback is great. So one thing I've used really well is, it depends on your company, feedback sites on intranets. In the UK, many years ago, we created a MAGIC acronym for Make a Great Idea Count. So this was feedback from staff to where they could submit anonymous ideas for how to improve things. The oil and gas industry does a similar thing called RUF, which is Report Ugly, Fix Failure. And that's typical oil and gas. It's RUF as opposed to MAGIC. But there you go. But again, the point is that question in chief is give people different channels of ways to suggest new things and answer problems that you might have. Oh, yeah.
When you're doing digital transformation, how do you broach the subject that the internet is global and commerce is natural and not everyone has a zip code?
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure where to start with that question. In terms of, so you're asking in terms of how do you make it real for people?
When you post something on your website, it goes around the world.
Right.
It's not limited to my geography.
Yes, true.
You're reaching people well outside of where most companies are expecting.
Yes. So the follow-up for those who didn't hear it was, how do you make sure what you're communicating accounts for the global population, because anything online goes pretty much everywhere and anywhere. And yeah, again, that diversity, your point, I think it was your question earlier, and that diversity and embracing that is just, you have to sense check pretty much everything you do online. In terms of products, again, you can start in a specific area. In terms of services, you can limit it to a certain area to start. But be prepared to scale, because people are going to reach out to say, hey, I'd like that product, and I don't necessarily live in that country. So how do we quickly ship it?
Websites are getting more intelligent. They're
Yes.
realizing that you're not in the geographic region and they ask you to switch
Right, yes.
for one.
Yep.
That's not universal yet. And the other thing is I'm sure everybody in the room has been to the third page on an order only to figure out who can't accept your payment here.
Yeah, it's hugely frustrating. You're right, and for those who didn't hear that, around websites that understand where you are geographically and then adapt it accordingly, and then get to the end of a shipping order and find you can't get it to your particular city or province. And yes, that's the complexity around technology. It gets very frustrating. It's very powerful, but it does get very frustrating. Okay, so I'm around after this session for more questions, and I'll be around tomorrow all day as well. I have the workshop in the morning, so we can certainly grab me after this session or in the morning tomorrow. So in summary, I've shown you true digital transformation and the value it can create. I've shown you how to get started with digital transformation using the playbook and those frameworks. I've shared those tips and strategies, which I'm hoping you can take away today and then use with your teams tomorrow. So I just want to leave you with these closing thoughts around next steps. So think of your digital experience and digital thinking, the customer experience and the digital thinking. Make sure that you focus on that value, the output, not the technology. You adapt next week by starting small on something, thinking digitally in the one before, and then start to apply that planning with those frameworks and the roadmap to start making it real. And leading next month, avoiding that status quo bias, that resistance to change. And look at those digital leadership skills and think how you can apply them in your own companies and teams. And growth mindset is another one. We'll talk about growth mindset tomorrow. It's a key one as part of that innovation and collaboration. So I want to leave you with some closing thoughts. Digital transformation is not about technology. It's about customer experience. Customer experience starts with you. Transformation starts with your teams. Digital transformation is not a revolution. It's an evolution. Start small, scale fast, and you can achieve great things. Each of us can impact Canada by helping people to learn to love change and also challenge that status quo. Canada can become more digital, and ultimately we can lead that industrial revolution. There are many great companies using technology to grow, and these companies are growing into something great. Amazing things are unfolding, and I believe in the power of technology. I also believe we have all the resources at our fingertips. I believe together we can achieve anything. Technology is exciting, but technology doesn't always have limits. Technology used in the right way doesn't have any boundaries, only our imagination. Together we'll open up new opportunities, help other people, improve other people's lives, and above all, have fun. So I want to leave you with a quote. Digital transformation is the light at the end of the tunnel. Project management is the train to get us there. Thank you.